this is in a way the supposition of our class. In other words, we'll be referring back to the things we talk about here very frequently over the course of the semester. So we're going to talk about happiness. So I'd like you to consider a question. Who is happier here, Bob or Mary? So Bob is a man, Mary is a woman. So obviously any particular individual man might be more or less happy than any particular individual woman. But if I ask you on average, if you have, 10,000 men and you have 10,000 women, or 100,000 men and 100,000 women, and you average up their self-reported happiness, who on average is going to be happier? On average are happier than women? Would it be women on average are happier than men? Who do you think's happier on average, men or women? The research I'm drawing on is from a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt, and a book he wrote called The Happiness Hypothesis. And in that book, what he's looking at is self-defined happiness. So people rate themselves as more or less happy. So that's how he kind of defines it. What the research shows, though, on this question is that on average, there is no significant difference on average between men and women in terms of their overall happiness. There are differences, and actually some of the differences were mentioned already. For instance, men are much more likely to commit suicide, but women are much more likely to have neuroses. So, but all things considered, there's no significant difference according to the research. So here's another thing, age. Bob is 35, Mary is 65. So does age make a difference for happiness? Well, the research here is sort of interesting, and I wonder if you guys can take a guess as to what that would be. So let's take a look here, and let's see here if I can get this going. What do you guys think about age and happiness? On average, who is happier? Younger people, middle-aged people, elderly people, or maybe it makes no difference? What would you say on average? Age really makes no significant difference for happiness. There are differences in terms of younger people tend to vary more significantly in their moods. So you get people that when they're younger, they tend to get really upset when something bad happens and really overjoyed when something good happens. And basically they kind of swing from kind of one extreme to the other more. And then as people get older, they tend to swing from one extreme to another less. And probably that's because, if you're 70, you've seen a lot of stuff. When good things happen, you're not, completely unbelievably thrilled because you've seen lots of good things happen. If something bad happens, you're not totally devastated. You've seen lots of bad things happen. So you're just sort of less radical in your kind of shifts of mood and such. But basically overall, the research indicates it doesn't really make any difference for happiness your age. Bob is white. Mary is African-American. What do you guys think? Does that make a difference for happiness? What would you say? On average. With respect to race, basically what they found is that there is, on average, no significant difference between, say, white people, Black people, Latino people, etc. That on average, it doesn't really matter kind of what race you are in terms of your overall reported happiness. Okay, so what about marital status? Right? Bob is single and Mary is married. Does marital status make a difference for our happiness? Or is that also something that is in effect irrelevant for our overall happiness? The research shows actually that married people are on average happier than single people. So you could have a particular single person who had tons of loving relationships, right? They love their parents, they love their friends, they love their siblings. And so they had a lot more happiness than, say, a person who was married but was in a miserable marriage and stuff like that. But on average, if you take, 100,000 married couples and 100,000 single people, on average, the married people are significantly more happy than are the single people. But that is an average, so it not applies to everyone. There's a lot of research about loneliness. And basically, if you're married, it's less likely that you'll be lonely. Now, you can be lonely when you're married, but just less likely. And when we look at loneliness, we know from tons of different studies that it is highly correlated with lots of negative outcomes. Like, for instance, dying early, committing suicide, being depressed. So we know that a rich social life, loving relationships with other people are really important for happiness. And those things can be found outside of marriage, that's true, but they're more likely to be found within marriage. In other words, if you're married to someone and you have a good relationship, well, it's not very likely that also you're going to be totally lonely, right? Because you're married to somebody and you have a good relationship with them, maybe you have some kids, etc. So I don't think it's just a kind of story that's been pushed that somehow marriage and kids are related to happiness. I think there's good empirical reasons based on the idea that loneliness is really antithetical to deep happiness. So research like this is usually done confidentially. So the idea would be, say, if I were interviewed, I would fill this out alone, and I would turn in my, information, and no one would know what I put on my form. So my wife wouldn't know, even the researchers wouldn't know. They just get a big stack of forms, and they don't know who said what. Now, obviously, that doesn't exclude the possibility of me lying on the form, but because it's anonymous, I don't really have a great motive for lying because no one's going to find out. So if no one finds out, why bother lying, right? Because no one's going to know who put down they had a horrible marriage or they had a great marriage. No one knows. All right. So how about athletic and healthy versus having some health problems? The research on this indicates that basically people's health is not incredibly significant for their happiness, outside of people that are like dying and, run over by a car or something. That basically minor health problems, people tend to get used to them. Even major health problems. There was interesting research about paralyzed people. And you might think if I got paralyzed or you got paralyzed, you'd be miserable and it would just be the end of your life and you wouldn't want to live anymore. But actually what the research shows is that most people who become paralyzed within a year of their accident report being back up to their original level of happiness. How about money? Bob earns 100,000, Mary only earns 40,000. We'll talk a little bit more about this today, but the research on money indicates that once you have enough money for your basic necessities, right? You eat 3 meals a day, you sleep in a bed, you've got warm clothes, you're not freezing outside, that basically more money doesn't make any significant difference for your overall happiness. How about looks? Say Bob is good looking, Mary's plain looking. You might think, oh, the supermodels, super handsome people, they would be a lot more happy than just plain regular people. But actually, the research doesn't bear that out. There's no correspondence between how beautiful someone is and how happy that person is. What about being active in church? Bob is not active in church, Mary is. The research on this actually indicates that this is something that makes a difference, that on average, people that attend religious services are more happy on average than those that don't. So where does all this leave us? Well, if we think about the relationship between happiness and our behavior, there's a whole field called positive psychology that is an empirical research about happiness. And what it indicates is this: we have about half of our happiness is genetically set. So just as some people are just kind of born more healthy and other people are born more sickly, so too, some people are just kind of born more upbeat, more positive. They have more positive emotion than other people have. Now, of course, we can't change that. We can't, go back and have ourselves reconceived with a different sperm or a different egg. But part of our happiness is life circumstances. So maybe you'd think if you moved to Hawaii, you'd be more happy. Or if you got a different job, you'd be more happy. But the research indicates that those kinds of life circumstances, like where you live, make actually a kind of relatively minor makeup of our happiness, only about 10%. So what does determine happiness? Well, as you can see from the chart, about 40% of our happiness is based on intentional activities. That is what we choose to do. The intentional activities are the things that we have the most control over, right? We can't change our genetics, and life circumstances only make a little bit of difference. So it's our intentional activities that make up the lion's share of the happiness that we have control over. So this is where Spitzer comes in. Different kinds of people seek happiness in different kinds of ways. And so we'll talk today about level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. The hedonist, seeking happiness at level 1, the egoist, seeking happiness at level 2, the altruist, seeking happiness at level 3, and finally the altruist of faith, seeking happiness at level 4. Now, whatever you do, there's going to be sacrifice. That is to say, if you seek level 1 happiness, you're going to have to sacrifice some level 2. If you seek level 2, you're going to have to sacrifice some level 3, and so on. So level 1 happiness is all about bodily pleasure. It's seeking happiness through, say, getting drunk, through taking drugs, through having sex, through eating food, things like that. This definitely does have some advantages. For one thing, it's very immediate, right? If you drink a bunch of booze, right away, you're going to feel some happiness, level 1 happiness. It is relatively easy to get, right? Almost anyone can find alcohol or drugs. And it can be at least very intense, right? You take a lot of alcohol, drugs, or have sex, it's going to be probably a pretty intense experience. Can you think of any crises of level 1, any ways in which level 1 is going to have a big downside for your overall happiness? One of the things about level 1 happiness is that it arrives very quickly, but it also seems to leave very quickly. So think about, say, when you're hungry and you eat food. When you're tasting the food, it tastes great, but once you're done eating, it's just in your stomach and you can't taste it anymore. So the pleasure of the taste is basically just, it comes and then it goes. It just kind of loses its excitement after a while to chase pure level 1 happiness. And that's why, for instance, almost everyone who lives moves out of pure level 1 happiness. Very, very few, people in their 50s or 60s or 70s are going to bars every night and getting totally drunk. Why? Well, because it's completely boring. I mean, they don't want to do that anymore. It's not as if a bar won't let them in. And there are, of course, some alcoholics who do that. But very few people continue doing that heavy, hardcore party thing for, indefinitely. So obviously, excess of level 1 can undermine your health, both physically and also your mental health, right? I mean, if you do tons of drugs and tons of alcohol, you're presumably not going to be very mentally healthy. You're going to get worse and worse off in terms of those things. And the crisis of the hedonist is, I think, something that is a real possibility. I mean, if you just take one example of alcohol, I think if it's obviously true that anyone who excessively uses alcohol is going to run into some serious problems, right? Just think of the next day. You have a hangover, you feel like hell, maybe you're still throwing up. I mean, that's part of the crisis of the hedonist. Plato also talked about the idea of diminishing returns. And the basic idea was that the more alcohol you drink or the more drugs you take, the more you need over the long term to get the same effect. So the very first time you drink alcohol, for example, maybe you drink 3 beers and you feel a big effect. But if you keep doing that, you're going to need 8 beers, 10 beers, 12 beers, etc., more and more and more to get the same level of intoxication. It seems to be the case that we want more out of life than just to feel these kinds of experiences. No one presumably would choose just to be in a dream machine or an experience machine and spend their whole life getting level 1 happiness without having anything else in their life at all. No real friends, no real achievements, etc. It just gets kind of boring pursuing pure level 1 happiness. And we all reach, in terms of level 1, a satiation point. So with food, there comes a point, right, where you can't eat anymore. You're just completely done. Or with sex, there comes a point where you've had sex and you're just like, okay, I'm all done. Thanks. I don't want any more. And the same thing is true of drug use, right? You can use so much drugs that maybe you pass out, but there comes a point where you just can't take in any more at all. One of the things that wasn't mentioned, which seems to me very important, is addiction. So level 1 happiness comes with the risk of becoming addicted, and that undermines our freedom, and that seems to undermine our happiness. So presumably none of us want to be like Peter Pan, where we're just seeking pleasure, we're just having fun, and it's kind of cute to be Peter Pan when you're a kid, but when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 60, it's kind of gross and disgusting to still continue to be a kind of Peter Pan figure. And in fact, everybody outgrows a pure devotion to level 1. There's really only 2 kinds of people that have a pure devotion to level 1 happiness, and that would be a hardcore drug addict who only cares about getting heroin or whatever, And then also someone like a newborn baby, right? Newborn babies only care about bodily pleasure, but everybody else grows out of pure level one. The idea of Peter Pan is a boy who doesn't want to grow up, right? He just wants to be a boy and just play games, seek pleasure, have no responsibility, never take on a real relationship, never do a real job, never be of real service, just kind of play around like a kid would play around on a summer day, right? I mean, think of, a little 10-year-old or something in the summer, just having fun with the skateboard and just doing nothing for anyone and just, kind of whittling the time away. The idea is something like, well, that's fine if you're 10, but if you're 40 and you're still on a skateboard and you're just kind of whittling the day away, there's something immature about that, right? You haven't really grown up. You haven't taken any real responsibility. And even though you might try to be 10 years old for the rest of your life, in fact, you're 40 or 50 or 60, and you just look like a fool. That's kind of the idea, I think. Everyone, or almost everyone, does shift through levels over the course of their life. So in other words, when we're babies, all we care about is level one, right? When you're a baby, all you want is to be fed, have your diaper changed, be snuggy, be warm. That's it. There's no baby in the crib who's like, I want level two happiness. I want to be the best baby in the crib. I mean, no babies don't care about that. They don't care about being famous or having money. They don't care about serving other people. They're just babies. Now, as you get older, say, your level of happiness is determined by you. So your choices determine what kind of person you are. So if you're someone who chooses level one against level two, level three, and level four, well, then you are a hedonist. You've become a level one person. So take the example of drunk driving, right? A drunk driver chooses level one, they want to get drunk, against, say, level three, because rather than being safe on the road and being fair to other drivers, they choose to get drunk. They choose their own level one over keeping everyone else safe, keeping themselves safe even on the road. So sometimes we have to choose one level of happiness rather than another. So let me give you a different example. We can choose more level two happiness by getting more money, but one way of getting more money is by stealing from others. So if I choose to get more money by stealing, what I'm doing is I'm sacrificing my level three happiness for the sake of level two. And if I do that, what I'm doing is making myself into a kind of level two egoist. On the other hand, let's say I try to get money, which I need money. I've got kids. I need to support them. So let's say I try to get money through getting a job. And so I work my job and the boss pays me and then I have money for my family. Well, in that case, yes, I'm getting more level two. I'm getting more money, but I'm not getting it by sacrificing level three. In fact, I'm getting it through getting more level three. Because if I'm doing a job, assuming I'm not a hitman, if I'm doing a regular job, I'm trying to serve somebody else, sell them shoes, mow their lawn, or whatever. So we have the power to choose who we are. And that power is manifested through our choices. If I consistently choose level one, then I'm just a hedonist. If I consistently choose level two rather than level one, well, I'm not a hedonist anymore. So it's really up to us, and we can always change. Even though you or I might be one particular level today, if I start choosing at a different level, I would become a different kind of person over time. Now, it wouldn't be like a one-day switch probably, but over time, I would become a different kind of person than I was originally. Our journey is determined in part by our choices. I am on a life journey, and the place I go, you might say, is in part determined by the choices I make. So if I'm choosing, say, level four, I could choose level four when I'm 20 years old, when I'm 40 years old, when I'm 90 years old. But I could also choose level one against level two, three, and four when I'm 20, 30, 40, 90. Now, I'm guessing most people, if they've lived a good life at 90, are not going to turn into level one hedonists, probably. But yeah, you still have that choice. I mean, you're a free person still. Now, little babies don't really have a choice. Babies are just stuck at level one. But once you're not a baby, right? Once you have, you're older and more mature, it's up to us how we live. It's possible to have all the levels of happiness at once. You're hungry, and so you eat food. So that's level one happiness, right? Getting the pleasure of food. But you could do that in order to be a good student. And maybe you want to be a really good student so you can get into medical school. So you have to be better than other people. So that's kind of level 2. So now you have level 1 plus level 2. But then maybe I ask you, well, why do you care about going to medical school? And your answer is, well, I really want to help other people. I have a passion for serving other people. I want to make them healthy. I want them to have better lives. And if I can help them be healthy and help them avoid sickness, I'll make their lives better. So then you'd be at level 3. Now, you could also be at level 4, because I might ask you, okay, well, why do you want to help people so much? And maybe your answer is, well, I think everybody is made in the image and likeness of God. And so I try to serve and help everybody I meet, because I think everybody has dignity, because God is the ultimate cause of everybody. So then you'd be at level 4. So within a particular day, you can kind of shift back and forth. That is to say, you can kind of enjoy level 1, and then maybe later in the day, you're enjoying level 3, and that's perfectly fine. But what makes you into a level 1 person isn't enjoying pleasure. It's perfectly fine to enjoy pleasure. But what makes you into a hedonist is when you're enjoying pleasure in such a way that it undermines your other levels of happiness. So for instance, let's say I'm a doctor and I get high at lunch and I come back and I'm high as a kite. Well, if I'm really high, I can't serve my patients who come see me. I'm going to make mistakes in their medical treatment and maybe even kill somebody. So if I were that doctor, well, what Spitzer's way of explaining that would be that I have chosen level 1 happiness in such a way that it undermines level 3 and level 4. And I've made myself into, or more into, a hedonist. So there's your identity shift. What could, I mean, it's in a way, it's unlikely to shift just in one action, but it could. Like, for instance, I'm not going to do this, but let's say today I went out and took heroin. If I did that, what would happen is I would like it, I'm sure, right? I'm human and heroin is pleasurable. So I'd like it. And I would risk getting addicted, and maybe I would get addicted. So I could shift into a level 1 person if I start taking heroin or something. But that's fairly unlikely. The more common thing is that you are what you habitually do, what you normally do. So level 2 happiness, what's that? That is winning. It's seeking more money, more fame, more power, more status than somebody else. And this is less immediate, but more long lasting. Typically, it takes you time to get more money, fame, power, and status. But once you have it, it tends to last longer than eating a cheeseburger for lunch or something. It also tends to be more meaningful, right? If you have these things, you'll be celebrated by society. Whereas level 1 achievements, people that took the most drugs or something are not really celebrated as meaningful achievements. It also is not physically addicting. So unlike heroin or drugs or whatever, you're not going to be physically addicted to power or popularity or status. It takes more effort, but it seems to be more satisfying, at least in the long haul. And so almost everybody, again, outside of babies and drug addicts, graduate from pure level 1 and get into at least level 2. But level 2 has a kind of crisis also. And one of those crises would be losing. If you're in a competition, it's possible to lose. And if you think life is all about getting more money, power, fame, et cetera, than others, and you don't, well, you're going to be really bummed out. And you're going to be jealous of others. You're going to look at people that are level 2 winners and look down on them, or be jealous of them and want to tear them down. And probably you're going to be pretty angry about your situation, right? Because life's all about winning and you're not winning. So you're a loser and you'll be very angry about that. So that doesn't seem good. A great example of this was Michael Jackson. He was a great example of even those who win at level 2 don't actually find lasting happiness. So Michael Jackson's album Thriller sold more copies than any other album of all time. And yet, Michael Jackson himself said, after Thriller, I spent the rest of my life trying to outdo Thriller. In other words, even the person who was number 1 wasn't satisfied with being number 1. Even if we win at level 2, we're going to up the stakes, as Michael Jackson did. Even if we win at level 2, we're going to get used to it. The psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. If you were to become president of the United States, probably on the first day you were there in the White House, you'd be thrilled. And the first night you slept in the White House, you'd be amazed. And you get up and say, I'm president. This is so awesome. But after you're president for a month, a year, 3 years, you'd be totally used to it. It just would be who you are. So whatever level of success or money or fame or power we get to, we adapt to that. And it no longer gives us the thrill that it first did originally. We also can become very ego sensitive, because if we think life is all about winning and we think we're a winner, we're going to look down on others. And if others don't treat us the way we want to be treated, we're going to be very toxic towards them. And this can lead to contempt for others and isolation and resentment. And that's exactly what we find in many two quote unquote winners. And what about money? There are some people who think that more money will make us more happy. And it certainly is true that if we thought of the good life in terms of money, we certainly could buy lots of level 1 happiness, right? If you have tons of money, you can buy lots of alcohol, lots of drugs, and lots of sexual partners. But we just got done talking about how level 1, even in big doses, doesn't really make us too happy. So money can also get us more level 2, right? You can buy power, you can buy fame, you can buy influence. But if level 2 doesn't really make us happy, then the money that we use to buy level 2 also cannot really make us lastingly happy. And so there's a lot of research about the relationship between money and happiness. And basically what it shows is this: if our basic needs are not met, money helps a lot. If you're really hungry and you have no food, and I give you some food, that's going to make you more happy. But after basic needs are met, there's no increase in happiness based on self-reported happiness or rates of depression. Here's a kind of statistical breakdown of that idea. It shows that from 1957 to 1998, on average, people in the United States were more and more and more wealthy. But you'll note that the percentage of people who said they were very happy basically did not change at all over the course of that time. So even though we had a lot more money, we as a country were no more happy than before. So more money does not equal more happiness. Now we can put all these insights together and think about what medieval people called the wheel of fortune. The wheel of fortune is the chance events of our lives. And if we're on the wheel of fortune, we can seek power. But if we seek power, the wheel of fortune can give it to us. The wheel of fortune can also take it away. The same thing's true with money. The same thing's true with pleasure. The same thing is true with honor. With all these kinds of happiness, what we're doing is we're giving our power for our own happiness over to somebody else. When we do that, we're outsourcing our control over our own happiness. And so if we get on the wheel of fortune, we're going to find ourselves going up and down. We might have more power than someone else, but then we might have less money than they do, or we might have less pleasure than they do. And in a certain day, we might be up and down and back and forth because our happiness at a level 1 and a level 2 is really out of our control. We can't make other people honor us. We can't keep ourselves happy. And so let's consider level 1 and level 2 maximized. Let's consider the celebrity. Isn't it true that celebrities have tons of level 1, or at least they can, right? Celebrities can take tons of drugs. They can take tons of alcohol. They can have tons of sex. They can also, celebrities, maximize level 2, right? If you're a celebrity, what that means is you are famous, right? If you're a celebrity, you've got lots of money. If you're a celebrity, you've got lots of power in the movie industry or whatever. Even though they have lots of level 1, in fact, maximum level 1, and even though celebrities often have maximum level 2, isn't it true that many celebrities are miserable? And so isn't it true that in fact, even maximum doses of level 1 and maximum doses of level 2 are not enough to give us happiness? Spitzer kind of gives us an intellectual analysis of why that would be true and why it happened not just to Justin Bieber, but to a whole long line of celebrities, right? And some of them are so miserable, they end up even killing themselves, despite being famous, despite having lots of money, despite having lots of booze, lots of drugs. They're totally miserable. At least some of them are. So that seems to indicate that level 1 and level 2 just don't, even in huge doses, don't provide lasting happiness for us. If we want happiness, Spitzer thinks, and I don't know if you agree or not, but he thinks that we need to move out of sort of shifting between level 1 and level 2. So in other words, the happiness of the egoist fails, right? Level 2, more money, more power, etc. And so some people say, well, it's Friday, I'm going to go get back to level 1, happiness of the hedonist. But putting those two things together doesn't seem to work very well. So how do we move out of the cycle? Spitzer thinks we need to move towards the happiness of the altruist. So altruists are people who seek to do good for other people for their sake. And therefore, because you're trying to do good for others, you try to avoid harming others. You are also somebody who avoids endangering others. So if you drive drunk, it's not like every time you drive drunk, you kill somebody, but you're always endangering the well-being of others. And so driving drunk would be something an altruist wouldn't do. Level 3 is all about love, right? It's about loving all human beings, not just those that are useful to you. A level 2 person would do that. A level 2 person would say, I'm gonna love people that help me get ahead in the industry, or I'll love people who help me make more money. But level 3 is about loving everyone, not just the people that help you get level 1 or level 2. So when we talk about love here, I'm talking about love as a decision, not love as an emotion. So it's impossible to love everyone emotionally because you can't know everyone, and some people are just not going to be your cup of tea. But I'm talking about love as a choice or love as a decision. And if we love other people, if we serve other people, we get off the wheel of fortune because our happiness ends up depending not on whether we get honored or whether we receive money or whether we receive honor or fame, but rather it's in our control. Love is something we can choose. We can't always control our pleasures. We can't always control power. We can't always control money. We can't always control honor. But I can always choose to love and respect other people. That is in my power. And so it gets us off this wheel of fortune where we outsource our happiness to other people. And it also helps end the comparison game. So rather than worry about other people and say, well, is this person more famous than I am, more rich than I am? I don't need to do that. You can compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not just who someone else is today. And so if we love others, we have to ask, well, what is love exactly? And love, I think, has really 3 elements. And the first would be willing the good of the other person for the sake of the other person. So if you love someone, you're choosing and deciding to do what's good for them. Secondly, you're appreciating the good of the other person. You're looking for whatever is good in them. So let's say you're looking at Luke Skywalker. You wouldn't love Luke Skywalker and appreciate that he's so good at ballet, right? I don't think he does ballet, but you might appreciate that he's good at, I don't know, using a lightsaber or something. And that includes even looking for the good news in bad people. In fact, everyone in your life is in some respects not good, right? I doubt you know anyone who's perfect. But even if there's someone in your life who's like Darth Vader, you can look for the good news in that person. Darth Vader, as bad as he was, still was physically strong, so that was good. He was good with the lightsaber, that was good. He was intelligent, that was good. So level 3 people look for the good news in others. And they seek to be unified with the other person. That unity is going to look different depending on the relationship, but the idea is you want to be in harmony with other people. So if we're going to do good for the other, you might say, well, what is good for the other person? So here we're talking about what is good for people. And you might say that there are basic human goods. And one of them is life. It's a good thing that we're alive. It's a bad thing if we were to die. Another one would be knowledge. It's a good thing for us to know things. It's a bad thing for us as human beings to be ignorant of things. Another basic human good is friendship. It's good to have friends and to be a friend to someone else. Another basic human good is practical reasonableness or personal integrity. So personal integrity is where your actions and your emotions are in harmony with your highest ideals. Another basic human good is marriage. It's a good thing to marry, to have a relationship with someone. It's a basic human good to seek transcendence, to try to figure out the answers to the ultimate questions of life and to live in harmony with those answers. So when we think about the acts of a level 3 and level 4 person, you might say there's 3 different parts. So there's the act itself, the means you use. So for instance, if you're a level 3 person, you love others. And so you would never do an action that in itself would be an unloving action. So what do I mean by that? Murdering someone. That's an action that is inherently unloving. Raping someone is another action that's inherently unloving, anti-loving. Level 3 people don't do any actions that are inherently contrary to love, contrary to justice. Secondly, the motive is good. So they're doing the right thing for the right reason. Thirdly, the circumstances are fitting and due. That is, that you are doing the right thing for the right reason in the right circumstances. And unless all 3 of these things are good, the action as a whole is not good. So the happiness of the altruist is all about here and now. It's about not just volunteering. Volunteering is great. It's great to take Saturday and go to the old folks' home and help them out. That's wonderful. But an altruist lives level 3 in everyday life, in regular life, right? Not just in volunteering opportunities. So it's refraining, for instance, in everyday life from intentionally harming others, harming them maybe by lying about them, by physically harming them, by recklessly endangering other people. And level 3 people also act with integrity, and that involves not lying. So if I lie to you, what happens is I have one thing in my mind, and then I say the opposite of what's in my mind. So I'm creating within myself a kind of inner schizophrenia. Now, level 3 people, I should clarify, also seek level 1 and level 2. So if you're a level 3 person, you do seek to eat food, and you do seek maybe money, but you wouldn't seek eating food or making money in such a way that it undermined other people's well-being. They don't limit themselves only to level 1 or level 2, but they don't choose level 1 or level 2 when it gets in the way of, you might say, level 3 or level 4. Let's talk a little bit about fun and altruistic activities. There was a psychologist named Martin Seligman who did an interesting study, and he divided people into 2 groups, students, and he said, okay, if you're in this group, I want you to do a fun activity like going to the movies or eating ice cream. And in the other group, he said, I want you to do some kind of altruistic activity. I want you to, teach kids how to read or visit the old folks' home or whatever. And basically both groups of people enjoyed what they did, but the group that did altruistic activity reported having much longer lasting feelings of enjoyment over what they did. Level 2 and level 3 have a really different view of other people. So level 2 views other people simply as a means, whereas level 3 people view other human beings as ends in themselves. Level 2 people view other human beings as having only instrumental value, and level 3 people view all human beings as having innate dignity and value. So depending on if you're level 1 or level 2, you view other people in radically, significantly different ways. Now, here we get to something I think very interesting. Spitzer claims, and you might agree with this, you might disagree, but he claims that level 3, as good as it is actually imperfect. He thinks that there's a crisis of level 3. And the crisis would involve guilt, first of all, because if you try to love others, you're going to fail sometimes, at least to do that. It's going to involve hopelessness, because if you try to love others, you realize that you can't always do that. You realize also that there's no human being who's perfect, and yet you want to have a perfectly loving relationship with others. And so you might end up having dashed idealism at a level 3. We have, Spitzer claims, transcendent desires. We want perfect beauty, we want perfect truth, we want perfect love, but we don't seem to find those things in any individual human being. And so Spitzer thinks there actually is a being who is perfect truth, perfect goodness, and perfect love. And so that is what level 4 happiness is all about. Does God exist? Well, if God exists, then level 4 happiness is a possibility. And so that brings us sort of to a place of decision and choice. obviously everyone in this class is free. You guys aren't children, and you are free to live your life the way you believe you should live your life. And we can live our life seeking level 1 happiness. We can become hedonists. We can live our life seeking level 2, become egoists. We can live our life seeking level 3 and become altruists. Or we can live our life seeking level 4 and become altruists of faith. So obviously how you live is up to you. It's your choice. It's your life. It's your decision. But it is a decision, I think, that it's worthwhile to think about how we're going to move forward in life and what would be the best way to live.